I was halfway through my second morning coffee when Jude marched into our open bullpen flanked by Rowan, Glenn, and Travis like an entrenched corporate firing squad determined to execute a coup. It was a cold Tuesday morning inside CleanMax's regional intelligence headquarters, where I sat quietly preparing detailed statistical slides for our mandatory weekly departmental review. Jude did not offer a standard greeting, nor did he meet my eyes across my dual monitors before slapping a single sheet of heavy white paper onto my desk with the chilling finality of an eviction notice. "We all signed this," Jude declared, intentionally projecting his voice across the 30 cubicles so every analyst, specialist, and intern could hear him announce that they were demanding upper leadership remove me from the department immediately before our quarterly review. I stared down at the bold printed header and the long rows of dark ink spanning the page. 23 distinct signatures representing every single analyst, data specialist, and junior intern across our entire regional division. These were the exact individuals I had mentored through grueling quarterly audits, protected when their production metrics dipped during unexpected family emergencies, and stayed until midnight coaching across our open workbenches when their algorithms failed. Yet here they stood shoulder to shoulder behind Jude's triumphant smirk, united in a calculated mutiny designed to strip away my authority before our executive committee arrived for their seasonal inspection. I scanned the names slowly, recognizing Rowan's stiff angular signature, Glenn's messy scrawl across the center margins, and even young Tessa's rounded cursive right at the bottom of the column. My hands remained perfectly steady against the polished desk blotter while my pulse held its disciplined, rhythmic cadence, refusing to grant Jude the explosive emotional confrontation he so desperately sought in front of his audience. I folded the petition once down the center with clinical precision, looked right past his smirk directly into his eyes, and spoke with calm, resonant authority that cut right through the bullpen tension. "Thanks for bringing this directly to my attention, Jude. I will make absolutely certain that upper leadership reviews every single signature on this document during our quarterly evaluation," I said smoothly before turning back to my keyboard. Jude hovered near my partition for several seconds, waiting for me to shout, argue, or beg for my position. But when I began typing with cold, uninterrupted focus, he turned on his heel and led his entourage away with a bitter scoff. "My name is Captain Arthur Vance, a 56-year-old former military intelligence data strategist, and devoted single father raising my 16-year-old daughter, Claire, after my wife's passing 7 years ago. In my 20 years commanding high-altitude surveillance arrays and tactical systems analysis, before transitioning into corporate infrastructure, I learned that the moment a commander surrenders to panic under unexpected fire, the entire unit collapses into irrecoverable chaos. I operate strictly by empirical discipline, structural accuracy, and ironclad composure, ensuring that every strategic move I make protects both my daughter's educational future and the operational integrity of the mission entrusted to my care." Jude and his conspirators assumed that because I spoke quietly, worked 50-hour weeks without boasting, and avoided their toxic break-room gossip, I was a weak transitional manager who could be bullied right out of the building. What those 23 mutineers could not comprehend as they celebrated around the break-room coffee machine was that I had not been blind-typing mundane status slides when they dropped their petition onto my blotter. For 6 consecutive months, I had been running deep, encrypted forensic tracking across every network server, logging every lazy email thread, fabricated metric, altered presentation file, and inflated client report across our division. I held complete digital visibility over the exact mechanics of how Jude and his inner circle had systematically manipulated company data to hide their declining performance while collecting substantial executive bonuses every quarter. And with the pivotal executive quarterly review, scheduled inside our glass boardroom just 14 days away, they were about to discover exactly what happens when you attempt to ambush a veteran intelligence strategist. The roots of this subterranean conflict began 6 months earlier, when I was unexpectedly summoned into the top-floor glass office on a rainy Thursday afternoon by Imogen, our chief executive officer, and Martin, our vice president of corporate strategy. The room felt tense and solemn as Imogen turned her laptop display toward my chair, revealing financial charts that showed our corporate analytics and Client Intelligence Division, hemorrhaging capital and losing critical accounts to regional competitors. Arthur, we need you to assume full operational command of our Analytics Division starting tomorrow morning. Imogen instructed, her voice crisp with absolute urgency. The department is outdated, bloated, and underperforming across every metric. If you do not engineer a complete operational turnaround within 9 months, we will cut the division entirely and liquidate every position without severance. I had spent the prior 3 years directing tactical product development for the company, establishing pristine analytical systems, predictable financial growth, and an unshakable reputation for solving complex structural failures without generating office drama. I understood immediately that Imogen's ultimatum was not merely a standard professional assignment, but a desperate rescue mission to preserve 30 families' livelihoods from imminent corporate liquidation before the fiscal year officially closed. I accepted the mandate on the spot without hesitation, promising Imogen and Martin that I would diagnose the division's systemic failures and build an analytical framework that would lead the entire regional industry. I walked out of that top-floor office carrying the full weight of 30 careers on my shoulders, completely unaware that the very people I was hired to save would instantly view my discipline as an intolerable threat to their comfort. On my very first morning commanding the analytics floor, I arrived an hour early carrying 3 boxes of fresh pastries from an upscale local bakery along with a concise 10-slide assessment deck outlining our mission. When the morning briefing commenced inside our conference room, half the chairs remained conspicuously empty, while the seated analysts stared sullenly at their laptop screens, without offering a single word of welcome or professional acknowledgement. Jude strolled into the briefing room 20 minutes late, carrying a ceramic mug, leaned against the glass wall with a condescending smirk, and interrupted me right before I could advance to my 3rd slide. We have been running this analytics division with these exact models for over 10 years without outside interference. Vance, our corporate clients are perfectly happy, so the problem certainly isn't sitting in this room, Jude announced arrogantly. I did not engage his public provocation or allow his disrespect to derail our objective, calmly clicking my remote to project our division's unvarnished empirical reality onto the 80-inch display screen right before their eyes. Here are our verified numbers from the past 4 quarters. Client churn is up 14%. Our customer acquisition costs are through the roof, and our renewal retention rate is barely holding at 46%. I stated levelly across the silent room. A heavy silence settled over the conference table before Glenn let out a loud, dismissive scoff, and Travis began tapping his metal ballpoint pen against the wood as if my empirical evidence were a personal insult. They had survived for a decade by hiding behind vanity metrics and convoluted spreadsheets, and they instantly recognized that my commitment to empirical truth would destroy their comfortable routine. The retaliation for my transparency began within 48 hours through a coordinated, subterranean campaign of passive-aggressive attrition designed to isolate me from the daily workflow and break my executive focus. When I walked onto the open floor on Wednesday morning, my engraved silver nameplate had been physically removed from my office doorframe and discarded into a recycling bin down the hallway. Over the following 72 hours, my administrative permissions across 3 shared network drives inexplicably vanished. Departmental Slack channels were secretly locked behind private invitation-only groups, and critical client communications were routed around my desk directly to Jude. It was not overt, prosecutable sabotage that would trigger immediate human resources intervention, but a sophisticated corporate freeze-out intended to paralyze my ability to manage the team while leaving my fingerprints on the resulting failures. Instead of filing administrative complaints or confronting Jude over his childish tactics, I simply rolled up my sleeves, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and got to work inside my office long after the evening cleaning crews arrived. I printed out every legacy workflow document, examined 5 years of client deliverables by hand, and stayed at my desk until midnight reverse engineering their 5 disconnected business intelligence tools. What I uncovered during those quiet midnight audits was staggering. The entire 30-person division ran on fragile duct-taped processes, manually copying raw figures between mismatched Excel spreadsheets and emailing unverified estimates around, like it was 2004. The department was sustained entirely by smoke, mirrors, and entrenched ego, prompting me to map out a comprehensive architectural overhaul that would rip their broken system down to the concrete studs. By my third week of command, I completed the engineering blueprints for our comprehensive structural overhaul and presented the framework during our Monday morning departmental briefing inside the main conference room. We are transitioning from surface-level vanity reporting to deep behavioral analytics, tracking verified client engagement, predictive drop-off indicators, and real-time ROI across every corporate account, I explained to the room while distributing clean workflow schematics. The reaction across the conference table was absolute, frosty defiance. Analysts kept their eyes glued to their smartphones. My follow-up emails were deliberately ignored, and Rowan and Travis began holding daily closed-door strategy meetings inside Jude's cubicle. They had made a collective decision to reject modern analytical standards entirely, wagering that if they stonewalled my initiatives long enough, upper leadership would blame me for the lack of progress and terminate my contract. That subterranean defiance escalated into outright sabotage during our critical mid-quarter strategy review before CFO Bennett and our senior executive committee inside the main boardroom on the executive floor. When my turn arrived to present our division's transition progress, I opened my digital presentation file on the master server only to discover that someone had accessed the drive overnight, deleted 4 vital statistical charts, skewed our financial projections, and completely scrambled our slide sequence. I stood before CFO Bennett and our executive vice presidents staring at a corrupted presentation deck designed to make my leadership appear incompetent, disorganized, and completely out of touch with our divisional numbers. I took one steady breath, closed the corrupted file on the display screen, and stepped directly to the center of the boardroom to address our leadership, purely from memory and veteran mastery. For 45 uninterrupted minutes, I delivered our complete analytical breakdown without a single slide, note card, or script, reciting exact client retention percentages, behavioral conversion curves, and projected financial yields with flawless empirical precision. CFO Bennett leaned forward across the mahogany table, listening with deep respect as I demonstrated absolute command over every dollar passing through our division, successfully guiding the executive committee through our transition timeline without missing a single beat. That evening, after the executive floors emptied, I quietly accessed our server logs, compared version timestamps, and ran digital audit trails across our shared drive permissions to identify precisely who had modified my presentation deck overnight. Jude and Glenn's user credentials and IP addresses appeared across 6 separate unauthorized access timestamps recorded between 2 and 3 in the morning, giving me indisputable forensic evidence of intentional corporate sabotage. While Jude and his ringleaders celebrated their supposed cleverness during long 2-hour lunch breaks, I focused my attention on identifying the genuine, uncorrupted intellectual talent sitting on our division floor. I quietly observed Lyall, a brilliant, unassuming data analyst, fresh out of graduate school, who stayed late running statistical models and always avoided the toxic gossip circles gathering around Jude's desk. I also noted young Tessa, a highly creative data visualizer, whose exceptional design instincts were constantly buried under Jude's cluttered, 30-page legacy reports because he refused to adopt clean graphical interfaces. I approached Lyall and Tessa individually after normal working hours, assigning them complex, highly confidential formulation tasks on sandboxed servers, separate from our main network to test their capabilities. For the next 4 months, while our bullpen remained engulfed in passive-aggressive resistance, Lyall, Tessa, and I operated as a cohesive, high-velocity tactical research unit inside our isolated server environment. Lyall built sophisticated predictive engagement algorithms capable of forecasting client churn 60 days before an account officially canceled, while Tessa designed sleek, intuitive visual dashboards that transformed complex behavioral data into crystal-clear executive insights. We tested our models against live historical data late into the night, sharing pizza across folding tables while refining our data pipelines until our system operated with the speed and precision of an aerospace navigation engine. We were quietly building an autonomous, next-generation intelligence platform right beneath Jude's nose, creating an unassailable technological moat, while he wasted his hours composing complaints and organizing mutinous petitions. By our 5th month of implementation, our quiet system adjustments began generating empirical results that broke right through the division's surrounding noise and negative propaganda across our enterprise accounts. Client retention across our beta test accounts started climbing with steady, undeniable momentum. Customer acquisition costs dropped significantly as we eliminated inefficient ad spend, and 3 major regional clients who had previously abandoned CleanMax initiated formal contract renewal discussions. Then an email arrived from one of our most demanding, hard-nosed mid-tier industrial clients carrying a simple, 3-word subject line, "Whatever you're doing." Inside the body of the message, their general manager explicitly praised our new real-time behavioral reporting, declaring that our analytical clarity had saved them $200,000 in operating waste and confirming a 3-year contract renewal on the spot. I forwarded that client endorsement directly to our departmental group thread, without adding a single word of commentary, allowing the empirical reality of our success to speak entirely for itself across our bullpen. The following morning, Rowan marched into our strategy sync, presenting a 40-page slide deck entitled Client Lockdown Framework, which he claimed was his own original conceptual breakthrough to secure enterprise renewals across our account portfolio. As I clicked through his presentation while he spoke, I realized with immediate certainty that Rowan had copied my proprietary retention algorithms word for word, rearranged our workflow schematics, and even lifted my signature tactical phrase stickiness over sentiment right off our sandboxed server logs. Instead of calling out his blatant intellectual theft before the team, I quietly created an encrypted desktop folder labeled Repeat Offenders, deposited Rowan's presentation alongside Jude and Glenn's server sabotage logs, and locked the archive with a secure timestamp. 3 weeks before our major executive quarterly review, right after Jude delivered his 23-signature removal petition to my desk, I initiated complete tactical lockdown across my workspace to prepare our final defense. I canceled all personal evening engagements, shut down my outside communications, and worked inside my office until past midnight for 3 consecutive nights, verifying every statistical formula, data link, and behavioral conversion metric across our systems. I printed comprehensive, notarized physical hard copies of every chart and built redundant offline backups across encrypted flash drives to ensure that no amount of server tampering could disrupt our presentation. When the morning of our quarterly executive showdown arrived, I stepped inside the glass boardroom, carrying not just our divisional projections, but an absolute bulletproof forensic dossier of proof that would permanently separate the builders from the saboteurs. We assembled inside the 30-foot glass boardroom, where Imogen, CFO Bennett, and VP Martin sat at the head of the polished mahogany table surrounded by our company's 12 regional division directors. Jude sat directly across from Chair, wearing his crisp navy blazer and signature triumphant smirk, nodding confidently toward Rowan and Glenn as the legacy division heads presented their safe, moderate growth reports. When the master display screen switched to my name, Jude crossed his arms over his chest and leaned back in his leather chair, entirely convinced that the petition sitting in Human Resources would make this my final address to the executive board. I stood up calmly, buttoned my charcoal jacket, plugged my encrypted security drive directly into the master terminal, and projected our division's verified empirical transformation right onto the wall. I walked our executive leadership through our empirical data with cold, surgical precision, revealing that across our 6-month transition, our verified client retention rate had skyrocketed by 340%. Furthermore, our customer acquisition overhead had dropped by 22% across all regional territories, and our verified new business pipeline had doubled in volume through our predictive behavioral targeting models. Audible gasps echoed across the mahogany table. 2 regional division directors dropped their pens onto their notepads, and CFO Bennett immediately raised his head from his ledger, staring at our revenue curves with absolute astonishment. Jude's triumphant smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a pale, frozen expression of sheer disbelief as he watched the empirical proof of our success obliterate every single narrative he had spun over the past half-year. Imogen leaned far forward across the mahogany table, her eyes locked onto our real-time behavioral conversion charts, with intense executive focus and growing admiration for what we had built. Explain to this committee exactly how your division achieved these extraordinary numbers in 6 months. Arthur, Imogen instructed, her voice commanding complete silence across the boardroom. I looked right past Jude's frozen face directly into Imogen's eyes and explained how we had eradicated vanity metrics, rebuilt our tracking architecture from scratch, and deployed real-time predictive behavioral algorithms to identify client needs before churn occurred. Every single chart on this display represents verified active accounts running across our new behavioral tracking engine right now, I concluded clearly. And this transformation was accomplished despite deliberate internal resistance and unauthorized attempts to alter our server data along the way. 48 hours after our boardroom triumph, Imogen and Martin summoned me back into the top-floor glass office, where they greeted me with warm smiles and a leather presentation folder resting on the table. Arthur, your analytical transformation is the most impressive operational turnaround this corporation has seen in a decade, Martin declared warmly, sliding the folder across the wood toward me with high praise. We are formally offering you a promotion to Senior Vice President of Corporate Intelligence, complete with a double salary band, a top-floor corner office, and executive parking privileges. I looked down at the leather folder containing the traditional corporate crown jewels, kept my hands resting calmly on the table, and shook my head with absolute clarity. I appreciate the executive confidence, Martin, but I do not want the senior vice president's seat, I replied levelly. Imogen blinked in genuine surprise, leaning back against her chair while CFO Bennett raised an eyebrow across the desk at my unexpected rejection of their top executive suite. You are walking away from our top executive package and double compensation bands, Arthur? Bennett asked with incredulity echoing across the room. I am walking away from inherited bureaucratic hierarchy and entrenched legacy dead weight, I explained with firm conviction. What I demand in exchange for my results is absolute operational freedom. I want formal corporate authorization to establish and command our company's very first autonomous strategic innovation and tactical platforms group, reporting directly to this office with zero inherited staff, zero red tape, and complete authority to handpick my entire personnel roster from across the organization. Imogen and Martin exchanged a long, decisive look across the desk, knowing that my empirical leverage was absolute, before Imogen nodded firmly and signed the authorization on the spot. The official corporate announcement was broadcast across our intranet at 8 o'clock the following morning, confirming the creation of our Autonomous Innovation Command and establishing my complete hiring authority across all regional divisions. By noon, over 40 analysts, engineers, and specialists from across the company stood in a line outside my office door submitting applications to escape their bureaucratic departments and join our new high-velocity group. When I finalized my roster at the end of the week, I selected exactly 14 individuals based strictly on empirical merit, intellectual honesty, and raw potential, naming Lyle as my second-in-command and Tessa as our head of interface design, while summarily rejecting Glenn and Travis for their toxic attitudes and lack of output. Every selection I made during that critical draft was guided purely by performance and integrity, ensuring that our new command would never carry a single ounce of fear or politics into the field. To my genuine surprise, Rowan appeared alone outside my office doorway late Friday afternoon, standing quietly without his usual arrogance or defensive excuses as he asked for 2 minutes of my time. Captain Vance, I was completely wrong about your leadership from day one, and I committed a massive professional error when I copied your retention algorithms and signed that removal petition, Rowan stated with sincere, unflinching humility while looking me straight in the eyes. I am not here to make excuses or beg for an executive title. I just want to tell you that, if I am ever granted a second chance to work under your command, I will prove through daily discipline that I have changed. I respected his willingness to own his blind spots without shifting blame, looking him over levelly before responding. Lyle directs our satellite data pipelines now, Rowan. If you want to earn your way back into this organization, you start as a probationary analyst under Lyle's direct supervision with zero shortcuts. Rowan accepted the terms instantly, without a word of complaint. grateful for the opportunity to rebuild his professional honor. We established our autonomous headquarters inside a windowless, raw basement storage room, stripped of corporate luxuries, featuring exposed overhead electrical conduits, bare concrete floors, and simple folding metal tables. We possessed no corner offices, no plush leather chairs, and no administrative secretaries, but we held complete operational permission to build the future of corporate analytics from the absolute foundation up. During our opening briefing, I stood before our 14 hand-picked specialists and established 3 non-negotiable governing principles. First, adapt to new data instantly. Second, collaborate with absolute transparency. And third, leave your personal ego outside that door every single morning. Although our initial weeks required intense adjustment, as our specialists acclimated to operating without rigid corporate memos and babysitting managers, our war room quickly transformed into a high-velocity research powerhouse where every individual owned their outcomes with pride. During our second month in the raw storage room, Jude walked into our open floor area, attempting to assert his legacy authority during a complex behavioral clustering brainstorm, raising his voice and cutting off junior analysts just as he had done in the old bullpen. Instead of publicly reprimanding him or stripping his dignity in front of the team, I simply stepped back and allowed Lyall and Tessa's superior empirical mastery to address his disruption. When Jude miscalculated our behavioral logic chain across 2 separate flowcharts, Lyall corrected his mathematical equations instantly and without a drop of condescension, while Tessa projected clean graphical interfaces that exposed the flaws in Jude's legacy assumptions right before his eyes. Faced with undeniable empirical excellence, Jude finally dropped his defensive armor, humbled himself before our team's standard, and began staying until 9 o'clock every evening, asking genuine questions to master our predictive architecture, earning his way back into our respect through quiet, dependable dedication. 8 weeks into our autonomous operation, we finalized and deployed our first major structural upgrade, the Caltech Predictive Engagement Platform, CP, an automated real-time behavioral forecasting system designed to identify client risks across 5 distinct telemetry signals. We pushed the platform live to our beta industrial accounts on a Thursday afternoon, and by Monday morning, client retention across the monitored segment had surged by 5 full percentage points, while generating $100,000 in immediate renewal contracts. Imogen and our executive board called an emergency demonstration inside our main auditorium, where Lyall and Tessa projected our live interactive dashboard onto the 60-foot screen, while our corporate division heads watched in absolute awe. When Imogen asked how quickly we could roll the system out across our entire enterprise, I answered with calm assurance that our deployment pipeline was already 2 weeks ahead of schedule, proving that our autonomous group had become the undisputed technological engine of the entire corporation. Our successful auditorium rollout triggered a massive industrial chain reaction as major Fortune 500 enterprises, municipal networks, and regional conglomerates began modeling their own intelligence divisions directly around our behavioral platform. Within 6 months, our raw storage room became the most coveted workspace in the company, attracting observation teams from top-tier venture capital firms who recognized that our modular system had completely disrupted traditional business intelligence architecture. Prominent venture capitalists began sending encrypted emails and scheduling confidential dinners, offering millions of dollars in seed capital and equity splits, accompanied by a single, burning question: what happens to the industry if Arthur Vance and his core team build an independent analytical empire entirely from scratch under your own rules? I did not rush into an immediate resignation, but I recognized that our technological capabilities had permanently outgrown the boundaries of CleanMax's regional structure. I scheduled a private one-on-one conference with Imogen inside the top-floor executive lounge upstairs, where we sat across from one another with 2 cups of coffee overlooking the city skyline. Imogen, I have received formal capitalization offers from 3 major venture capital firms to launch an independent analytical platform corporation. I informed her openly and without ultimatum. Imogen looked out through the glass window for several moments, turning back to me with an expression of profound professional gratitude and respect rather than anger. I knew this day would come when I watched your auditorium demonstration, Arthur. Your team has completely outgrown our corporate framework, Imogen said softly. You have my absolute blessing to launch your enterprise on one honorable condition. Promise me that you will not aggressively poach our remaining operational staff. I smiled warmly, shook her hand with deep respect, and promised that our departure would be clean, ethical, and seamless. 2 weeks after establishing Vance and Lyle's strategic platforms, Lyle called my cellular phone to announce his immediate resignation from CleanMax, joining my banner as Vice President of Engineering without asking a single question about salary or titles. Tessa followed 48 hours later, attaching a fully realized, breathtaking user interface mock-up for our new corporate operating system directly to her formal resignation letter. Over the following month, Rowan and 12 of our top analytical specialists voluntarily transitioned over to our independent enterprise, compelled entirely by their desire to work inside an environment driven by momentum, absolute truth, and mutual respect rather than corporate politics. We secured a functional, high-ceiling industrial warehouse space in Atlanta, featuring exposed brick and simple workbenches, re-established our 3 foundational rules of rapid adaptation, hard collaboration, and zero ego, and achieved full financial profitability within our very first 12 months of operation. By our second year in Atlanta, our independent firm was providing high-level analytical infrastructure and predictive intelligence to multinational corporations and industrial conglomerates, 5 times the size of CleanMax. Late one Friday afternoon, while I was reviewing our expansion architecture, the elevator doors of our warehouse headquarters slid open, and Jude walked out onto our bullpen floor, carrying a leather portfolio. He did not ask for an executive title, nor did he demand special treatment because of our long shared history across Cincinnati. He simply stood before my desk with quiet, mature resolve. Captain Vance, I realized over the past year that sitting in an entrenched office collecting titles means absolutely nothing if the work lacks empirical integrity, Jude told me honestly. I want to earn a seat inside this organization under your exact standards, even if I have to start at the bottom of the analytical ladder. I put him through our rigorous technical evaluation process alongside every other candidate, and when his empirical scores earned him a position directing our integration partnerships, I welcomed him aboard with genuine respect. Exactly 5 years after that fateful Tuesday morning, when the 23-signature removal petition landed on my desk, I stood at the head of a private dining table inside an exclusive Atlanta restaurant, celebrating our firm's 5th anniversary. Our leadership roster gathered around the white linen tablecloths, dressed in sharp-tailored suits and evening dresses, enjoying a rare evening where laptops and cellular phones were strictly forbidden. As I looked around the room watching Lyle laugh with Tessa over a design concept, while Rowan and Jude shared stories about our early storage room struggles, a profound realization washed over my mind. Exactly half of the brilliant, fiercely loyal executives commanding my enterprise tonight consisted of the very same analysts who had once signed their names to a document demanding my immediate termination 5 years ago. Mounted inside a sleek black frame on the exposed brick wall, right near the entrance of our private dining room, hung the original 23-signature removal petition that Jude had dropped onto my blotter during my first winter at CleanMax. We did not display the document to humiliate anyone, nor was it exhibited to harbor old resentments. It hung there as a sacred, permanent monument to our team's collective growth, resilience, and capacity for personal transformation. Whenever a newly hired engineer or visiting corporate client paused near the doorway to examine the framed signatures, Lyle or Rowan would smile and explain our company's ultimate operational philosophy. Never allow your worst, most fearful day to define your career, because when faced with empirical truth and strong leadership, that exact obstacle might become the foundation for your greatest victory. I picked up my crystal water glass, tapped my silver fork gently against the rim to summon the room's attention, and stood up before the 40 extraordinary men and women who had built our analytical empire. I want to raise this glass and express my deepest, most sincere gratitude to every single individual in this room who signed that petition 5 years ago. I spoke clearly across the quiet tables, my voice carrying absolute warmth without a shadow of sarcasm or bitterness. You provided me with the exact operational clarity and empirical motivation required to rebuild our standards from the ground up. proving that when men and women commit to intellectual honesty and hard work, any fracture can be healed into an ironclad foundation. My team raised their glasses across the room in a silent, deeply emotional salute of mutual respect and unbreakable unity, cementing the reality that true leadership never triumphs through petty revenge, but through undeniable proof, flawless execution, and building a system that stands victorious across the test of time.